Hey, 23 past the hour. Welcome back to the Daily Buzz. Earlier this week, Toyota did the unthinkable. They asked their dealerships to stop selling some of their most popular models of cars. They were concerned about gas pedals getting stuck and uncontrollably accelerating the vehicle. Just last night, the company expanded that recall to include over 1 million more cars. But what does this mean to consumers and the company's future? Here to put the pedal to the metal on Insight is the Watchdog on Wall Street, Chris Markowski. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
All right, so this is fairly unprecedented. First of all, for those who don't know, and it's been a big story for the last several days, these pedals can get caught on the mats, and there was also a separate recall for pedals that just get stuck on their own. But all these recalls dealing with the accelerator. Fairly unprecedented, the level of this recall, isn't it?
Yeah, I called a couple of dealerships and kind of inquiring what the deal was, and they said that it's actually, you got to worry a little bit once you get over 35,000 miles. There's definitely cause for concern. I think we have to kind of hand it to Toyota for actually, as soon as they're finding out about something like this, jumping out in front of it and trying to deal with the horrible situation. The CEO is, it's a Japanese company, and they have a different way of almost dealing with mistakes and almost this honor type of a principle. And I think they're doing a good job in taking the steps to try to rectify the situation.
How do you think this is going to affect, though, the long term? Is that approach that you're talking about, is that going to mitigate, any loss in overall long-term sales, or do you think that this is going to have a lasting impact on the Toyota brand?
I think it will, obviously, over the short term, but obviously over the long term, I think they'll end up being okay. I think it can be seen almost as a benefit in the long run. But some of the other...
Because they're that concerned with safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other automakers should. It's capitalist. It should take advantage of the situation.
Like GM has done?
Yes. GM this morning, they announced that they're going to say if you're going to switch from a Toyota to GM vehicle, they're going to give you a $1,000 bonus. And I'm sure the other automakers are going to highlight it. But you never see the automakers bash safety, because they all know that they've had to have their recalls, or something can happen and can come back to haunt them. So they kind of lay off to that degree.
Okay. And how do you think this is going to affect the used car market, especially, vis-a-vis selling old Toyotas and so forth?
Well, I think people are it's going to obviously put something into their mind, just as much as, Chrysler and General Motors have people. It's in the back of people's mind, too, that the government is involved with them, and that's why their sales are doing so poorly. I think, once again, this is going to be another boon for Ford. So many people are going on to buying Ford models because of that, and now this, I think Ford will do quite well.
Yeah, and it's amazing how people have rewarded Ford for being the one that famously hasn't taken the bailout money.
Hasn't taken the money, the taxpayer money. It's that populist movement around the country. People trying to avoid that type of stuff, and Ford has definitely reaped the benefits, and they're actually starting to hire again, which is nice to see. They're opening up a plant in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Learned this past week, so that's good.
Okay, and do you know those folks with the Toyotas concerned about the accelerators? They bring them back to the dealership? Do you know? Or?
Well, I think a lot of the dealers don't even know how to go about handling it yet. They're supposed to be getting a card in the mail, then you're supposed to take it there. But I would. If I had a Toyota minivan, and my kids are in it, I'd be nervous too. There's no doubt about it.
Well, earlier this week, Toyota did the unthinkable. They asked some of their dealerships to stop selling some of their most popular models of cars. Now, this is because they were really fearful about some of these gas pedals in some of these models, that they'd start accelerating uncontrollably. And just last night, the company expanded that recall to include over 1 million more cars. But what does that mean for the consumers that are driving these cars? Well, here to weigh in is the Watchdog on Wall Street, Chris Markowski. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Okay, so a quarter of the Buzz staff actually drive Toyota. Some of these cars have been recalled. What can they do? What exactly does it mean when your car's recalled? What are your rights as the consumer?
Well, you're going to have to go back to your dealership. You're going to get a card in the mail. They're going to tell you what to go about fixing. I would do that as soon as possible, obviously. You don't want to let something like this go, especially if you got family, you got kids. If you've got tickets, maybe you'll be able to get out of them after the fact. You think about it, my accelerator got stuck, so what am I going to do now? But get on it as soon as possible. Understand what your rights are. Certain states have lemon laws. This is not going to apply. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to take it into your dealer, make sure they're going to replace it as soon as possible.
Okay, so the people out there that may have just gotten their car, let's say, a couple weeks before this recall happened, they can't say, hey, look, you sold me a lemon, you have to replace the vehicle.
No, they can't, but you'd be surprised at what Toyota will do. It also gives you some negotiating standpoints when you go back there saying, hey, listen, you're going to fix this car for me. You're talking about this a little bit earlier before the break, Holly, with your mom, give you a rental while it's being fixed. Maybe throw in some extra service deals down the road, do various different things. Toyota wants to keep their customers. They don't want to alienate their strong base. They're a popular auto manufacturer, #1 in the world. So you know what? They're gonna do everything that they can to keep their customers.
And Chris, you mentioned they're #1 in the world. How much do you think this is going to hurt them? Are people going to start buying domestic cars, at least here in the U.S.?
Well, all companies have missteps. All companies make mistakes. I mean, Coke brought out new Coke, didn't work out too well. This is a mistake, but it's glad to see a corporation take responsibility for their mistakes, and I think that'll benefit them in the long run.
But it's just such a huge mistake when you think about, okay, I could be on the highway, my car starts accelerating, it goes out of control, there's nothing I can do. A lot of people freaked out about that.
Well, absolutely. But this is before your time. Now I'm feeling old. This is the cars back in the 70s. Cars back in the 70s, they were actually cover up some of these things that happened, and they didn't report on them. With some of the cars where there would rear-end collisions would cause explosions. Ralph Nader fame, he actually kind of highlighted some of this stuff a long time ago. At least they're owning up to it.
Okay. And seconds left, when do you think that we will be able to see this problem tackled and dealt with, and people can start seeing their cars being repaired?
Almost immediately. Toyota will be on it as soon as possible. That's they're a good company. There's no doubt about it, and I'm glad to see that they came out with as quick as possible.
Thanks, Kia.
Chris, well, believe it or not, your social networking habits can ruin your finances, and you might be wondering, how does that happen? Well, here to discuss the ways Facebook and MySpace can kill your finances is the watchdog on Wall Street, Chris Markowski. Morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Okay, so financial pitfalls of social networking sites. Sometimes people don't think about this when they get online.
Well, obviously, first, job hunting. I'm an employer, all right? So if I'm going to go hire somebody, and you're looking and you Google a person and you see on their Facebook page and they're doing all sorts of crazy things.
Give us an example.
For my line of work, probably if you're, down in too many bottles of tequila on a, midday, something like, probably not a good idea. You want to get a job maybe at the, the gentleman's establishment. It might be all right, but
that'll get you in the door there.
Yeah, certainly. But you have to be careful in what you put out there in regards to that, because all that information is pertinent. Most job employers are actually going to do searches on you anyway. If you're laying this stuff all out there, you're going to be a representative of their company, and they understand this as an employer, and they're going to want to be careful who's representing.
Sure, they want a certain image projected, and if you're getting wasted on a beach with, scantily clad people,
I went to college too. I was a troublemaker, but you're not going to post that stuff on the internet.
Sure, you might be fun to hang out with, just not the right person to hire. And you also got to be careful about what you're writing on. For instance, on Facebook, you can write messages on people's walls. Got to be careful about the language you're using there as well.
Yeah, people have lost their jobs because of this. I think wasn't there one of the football player, I think from the Kansas City Chiefs, he said made a slur, a homosexual slur, and he lost his job.
On Twitter.
Yeah, or one of the sites.
Fined.
You got to be very careful what you're doing, because he's representing the Kansas City Chiefs, and they didn't like the way he was representing them.
Sure. Okay, let's talk about those debt collectors. Bill collectors going on Facebook, MySpace to find people that owe them money.
Well, they have the right to do that. In all honesty, debt collectors, what they do is they buy your debt. They're like Dog the Bounty Hunter for the most part, and they're going to do anything can to find out what your deal is, what your situation is, because they get paid when they collect from you. So yeah, that's your open game. They're going to go there.
Okay, so debt collectors, and lastly, scams. A lot of people getting conned online these days.
Yeah, you thought that the whole Nigerian, $30 billion type deal might have gotten over, but they still work their way through here, these things too.
Well, they can hijack your friends' accounts now. So you actually are getting messages from your friends' accounts. You think it's your friend, and they're asking for money, and some people will get bilked that way.
It's called a telephone, okay? If your friend can't pick up the phone to ask you for money, well, then you got a problem, okay? So
exactly.
You got to avoid it. Be very careful. I get a dozen emails a day, things a day from all sorts of banks and whatnot telling me that my account's been closed or this has happened. I don't even know who these banks are. They're phishing.